Okay, this is actually going to be the middle of the video. This is a Honda Elite. It's the one we put the 90cc kit on. We got it up to a little over 55 miles an hour. Well, we blew out the crank and rod bearings in it, so we had to order a new kit. And we decided to get this monster stroker kit, and we're going up to a 129 or 121cc. Got the new cylinder, piston, all that. We'll have to reuse the head. It's a 121cc with a stroker crank, so I am having to machine out the whole block. Just thought I'd show you real quick. This is basically what I use to mark my block, and I come along here like this, and I just real slowly got me a mark on my cylinder and cut that groove out. This one I've already been grinding on, and so far I've had to do where the cylinder goes in, and what I did is I took the base gasket they gave me, I put it on my cylinder that I had to do the machining on, and then I also put it on the cylinder to see what kind of slack I had. It was very minimal, so with my head bolts in here, I put the gasket on, and I took a black magic marker and I traced around the inside, and that pretty much gave me my difference that I need to machine off. Now, I didn't take this to a machine shop. I did this crap with a Dremel. Measure 8 times, cut once is the best thing I can tell you. I got it to where the cylinder goes down in now, but what we didn't know is the crank was a lot bigger. So I have actually been already chopping this down. You can see how thin now this is. It started out that thick. And what I did with this is I took my crank, I set it down in here. These bearings have to be pressed on so this crank ain't going to go all the way down in. But as you can see, I've got clearance now. And I just took a scratch awl and scratched, pointing at the crank, I scratched a nice line all the way around it. Do not get overzealous, because if you scratch this part, you're going to end up leaking oil. You don't want to do that. But that's what I did. You can't really use a magic marker or anything, but this is ready to press in. It's actually beveled at an angle. If you look at the stock one, it starts big and it goes smaller. So this one I had to make sure and cut down real straight. And the crank I should be able to put this down. So I'm going to have to machine this one, and then we'll start putting her back together. I'll have to do the video backwards to show you how to take it apart. But 121 stroker kit on this Honda Elite, and should be cool. With this particular kit, I don't have an oil pump gear, so we'll have to block that off somehow, and we'll get that taken care of. But ought to be a monster. And like I said, we blew out the rod bearings was the worst, that one there, and then the crank bearings had play in them too. Really, when you're machining this, you should tape them bearings up so you don't get aluminum in them. It was too late for me. Those bearings in here, are pressed in. So when I did this, I put my block on a nice piece of wood. You always want wood because it gives a little bit. Then I took a big chunk of wood, and I don't know what I did with it, but I slowly hammered this bearing in. Take your time. You start getting at an angle, you can bust that aluminum pretty easily, so don't get overzealous. Take your time. Do a lot of measuring, looking before you start cutting, chopping, and sanding. And I'm going to get the grinding on this one, and my buddy's got a press. If I have any problems, I'll probably just take it over there and have him press the bearings and all that together. But got a lot of grinding to do. I actually had to cut these tabs off too, because the rod's going to end up hitting them. You can see on the stock one how far these stick out. And that's actually where the cylinder goes down and stops on. But we've got to get rid of them or the rod's going to hit that. This thing's going to be crazy fast. Alright, so got some more machining to do. Talk to you later. Well, unfortunately, when we put it back together, it rubbed. As you can see, it was right in there. So, one little spot there. And one teeny spot there. So, I'm going to have to do just a smidge more grinding. I'm going to tool. I got a sandstone on there, so here we go again until we get her done. Anyway, block's a lot thinner, holes are real close. Hopefully this thing holds together. That's pretty thin, but I guess after we sandwich it together, it'll be okay. Well, we took out a lot of aluminum. Alright, the Honda Elite. Went ahead and sanded some more off of right here because it looked like the rod was going to hit, and maybe part of the crank itself. Got it pretty good. Think it's going to work. So got it sitting. Just going to have to go down a little bit further, about 10 more millimeters or so. We're going to freeze this crank in the freezer. The metal will contract a little bit, and hopefully it'll just drop right down on that bearing. If we have to, maybe we'll heat the bearing up. We're going to take this and actually take all the wiring off of it. I'm going to put it in the sink and wash it with Dawn dishwashing soap, get all the metal flakes off, and we'll wash it a few times, get it all cleaned up before we put it back together. There you go. But check your clearance. You know, we've got a little bit all the way around, and you got to make sure that wall's straight, because once you press that on there, if it ain't, you're going to be in trouble. Alright, it's been through the sink, used some Dawn dishwashing soap, went back and cleaned it back out with carb cleaner again, blowed it out with air hose, and if you see that blue stuff there, that's actually two-stroke oil, and I went ahead and lubed this bearing with two-stroke oil. That way I wouldn't have any problems with lubrication when we first start the motor. Do that with both bearings. Can never use too much. May smoke a little bit at first, but that'll be alright. And we got the crank in the freezer, and cleaned off a bunch of the motor. Looks a lot better. And we'll wait for it to freeze and put it together. See what happens. Cleaned off a bunch of this piece too. It's not 100% clean, but sure does look a lot better. And did the same thing, two-stroke oil on the bearing.